The hammer slipped from Rebecca Jordan's fingers and clattered down the pitched roof of the schoolhouse, tumbling over the edge and landing with a dull thud in the dirt below, nearly striking the boots of a tall stranger who had appeared as silently as a mountain cat. She froze, one hand gripping the weathered shingles, her cotton work dress already stained with tar and sweat, despite the cool Colorado morning air settling over our ray in late September of 1878. "You planning to finish that roof, or you aiming to kill passers-by?" The man's voice carried a trace of amusement beneath its rough edges, and when Rebecca finally looked down at him properly, shading her eyes against the morning sun, she found herself staring at a face that seemed carved from the same granite that made up the surrounding San Juan mountains. He wore dusty trail clothes, a worn leather vest over a faded blue shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, dark and deep, holding something that looked like old pain barely covered over with practiced indifference. "I was not aiming at anything," Rebecca called back, irritation flaring in her chest. "If you had announced yourself like a proper gentleman instead of sneaking up, I would not have been startled." The stranger bent to retrieve her hammer, turning it over in his hands with the practiced ease of someone familiar with tools. "This handle is cracked halfway through. You are lucky it only fell instead of breaking and taking your hand with it." Rebecca felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the sun. She knew the hammer was in poor condition. She knew that half the tools in the small shed behind the schoolhouse were falling apart, just like half the building itself. But knowing and having the means to fix everything were two entirely different matters, especially on a teacher's modest salary in a mining town, where most families could barely afford to send their children to school at all. "I am aware of its condition, thank you," she said, making her way carefully toward the ladder she had propped against the side of the building. "If you will kindly leave it at the base of the ladder, I will return to my work." "Your work is going to get you killed," the man said, not moving. "These shingles are rotted through in places. The whole roof needs replacing, not patching." Rebecca climbed down the ladder with as much dignity as she could muster, which was not much given that her skirts kept catching on the rungs and her hair had come loose from its pins hours ago. When she finally reached the ground and turned to face the stranger, she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. He stood well over 6 feet, broad-shouldered and lean in the way of men who spent their lives in the saddle. "And I suppose you are a master carpenter who happened to be passing through our ray and felt compelled to offer your expert opinion." The words came out sharper than she intended, but Rebecca was tired, frustrated, and more than a little embarrassed at being caught in such a state by a man who looked like he had stepped out of one of the dime novels her students sometimes smuggled into class. Something flickered across his face, there and gone so quickly she almost missed it. "Matter of fact, I am the new schoolmaster, or at least I thought I was until I arrived to find someone already occupying my position." The bottom dropped out of Rebecca's stomach. She stared at him, her mind racing through the implications. "That is impossible. I am the schoolteacher. I have been the teacher here for 2 years. And I have a contract from the town council saying they hired me 3 weeks ago." He reached into his vest and pulled out a folded piece of paper, offering it to her. Rebecca snatched it from his hand, unfolding it with trembling fingers. Her eyes scanned the words, her heart sinking with each line. It was legitimate, signed by Mayor Hendricks and 2 other council members, offering the position to Xander Walsh, experienced educator and former soldier, starting October 1st at a salary of $60 per month. $60. She made 30. "There has been a mistake," Rebecca said, her voice tight. "No one informed me that my position was being terminated." Maybe they thought a woman would not be able to handle both teaching and maintaining the building, Xander said, his tone careful now. This roof being evidence of that. Rebecca's temper, usually kept under careful control, snapped like a dry twig. This roof is evidence that the town council refuses to provide adequate funding for school maintenance, not of my capabilities as an educator. I have been climbing up here every weekend for the past month trying to patch it well enough to last through winter, because the alternative is having my students sit through lessons in the rain and snow. So forgive me if I do not appreciate a stranger appearing out of nowhere to judge my efforts. She thrust the paper back at him and started gathering her tools, blinking back furious tears. This could not be happening. Teaching was not just her livelihood. It was her purpose. The thing that had given her life meaning after she had fled to Colorado from Missouri 4 years ago with nothing but a carpet bag and a teaching certificate. The thought of losing it, of being cast aside like she was nothing, made her chest ache with a familiar hollow feeling she had worked so hard to leave behind. Wait. Xander's hand closed gently around her wrist, stopping her. His touch was warm, calloused, unexpectedly careful. I did not mean to insult you. I can see you have been doing your best with what you have. Rebecca pulled her hand free, not trusting herself to speak. Let me help you with the roof, Xander continued. At least for today, then we can sort out this confusion about the teaching position. I do not need your help, and there is nothing to sort out, Rebecca said, but even as the words left her mouth, a gust of wind rattled the loose shingles above them, and they both looked up to see a section near the chimney flapping like a broken wing. Though I suppose an extra pair of hands would not go amiss, just for today, Xander nodded, removing his hat and setting it on a fence post. Just for today. They worked in tense silence for the first hour, Xander proving himself surprisingly competent with hammer and nails. He moved with economic efficiency, wasting no motion, and Rebecca found herself sneaking glances at him when she thought he was not looking. His hands were scarred, she noticed, crisscrossed with old white lines that spoke of hard use. A soldier, the contract had said. She wondered what war had put those marks on him, what battles had carved that permanent wariness into the set of his shoulders. You are staring, Xander said without looking up from the shingle he was nailing down. Rebecca jerked her gaze away. I was merely observing your technique. Is that what we are calling it? There was a hint of humor in his voice now, slight but present. How did you come to be a teacher? Rebecca asked, partly to change the subject and partly because she genuinely wanted to know. Most men with his obvious physical capabilities went into mining or ranching, not education. Xander was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he said, I needed something different from what I was doing before. Teaching seemed like it might be a way to build something instead of tearing things down. Were you in the war, among other things? His tone made it clear the topic was closed. They continued working, the silence between them shifting into something more companionable. The sun climbed higher, warming the air, and Rebecca shed her shawl, too focused on the task to care about propriety. Xander had good ideas about how to reinforce the weak spots, and despite her initial resentment, Rebecca found herself grateful for his knowledge. You have done this before, she said as they paused for water from the bucket she had brought. Built a lot of things over the years. Schools, churches, homes. Helped rebuild a whole town once after a fire. Xander wiped sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. Good honest work. Unlike soldiering, he looked at her sharply, and Rebecca immediately regretted the question. But instead of anger, his expression softened into something sad and distant. War is necessary sometimes. That does not make it honest or good. Before Rebecca could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. 3 men rode up, dust billowing from their horses' hooves, and Rebecca's stomach clenched when she recognized Mayor Hendricks in the lead. The other 2 were council members, Samuel Porter and Dutch Kaufman, both wealthy mine owners who treated the school as an afterthought at best. "Miss Jordan," Mayor Hendricks said, not bothering to dismount. He was a portly man with thinning hair and the satisfied look of someone who enjoyed exercising his small amount of power. "I see you have met Mr. Walsh." "I have," Rebecca said, wiping her hands on her already ruined dress. "Though I confess to being confused about why you hired a replacement without informing me." "We did inform you," Hendricks said with false patience. "We sent a letter 2 weeks ago explaining that the town council had decided the position required a man's touch, particularly given the additional maintenance responsibilities." "I received no such letter," Hendricks shrugged. "Nevertheless, it was sent. Your services will no longer be required after the end of this week. We will, of course, provide you with 2 weeks' pay as severance. $60. The words burned in Rebecca's mind. They were paying a man twice what they had paid her, and now they expected her to simply disappear without protest. "And what am I supposed to do? Teaching is my profession. I have students who depend on me." "Perhaps you can find work as a seamstress or a housekeeper," Porter suggested, his tone dismissive. "Teaching is demanding work, too demanding for a woman to manage alone. This building is falling apart, and we cannot continue to allocate funds when the teacher cannot maintain it properly." "You allocated $50 for maintenance this entire year," Rebecca said, her voice shaking with barely controlled fury. $50 for a building that needs a new roof, new windows, and a new stove. How exactly was I supposed to maintain it on that?" "That is hardly our concern," Kaufman said. "The decision has been made. Mr. Walsh will take over on Monday." Rebecca looked at Xander, who had been watching the exchange with an unreadable expression. "Did you know about this, that they were dismissing me?" "No," Xander said quietly. "The advertisement I answered said the position was vacant due to the previous teacher relocating." "Well, that is technically true," Hendricks said breezily. "We simply moved the relocation date up. Now, if you will excuse us, we have business to attend to." "Mr. Walsh, we will expect you Monday morning. Miss Jordan, please have the schoolroom cleared of your personal effects by Friday." They rode off before Rebecca could form a response, leaving her standing in the yard with her world crumbling around her. The unfairness of it, the casual cruelty, threatened to overwhelm her. She had poured her heart into this school, these students, this town that now discarded her like yesterday's newspaper. "I am sorry," Xander said behind her. Rebecca spun to face him, anger and hurt warring in her chest. "Are you sorry enough to refuse the position, to tell them their treatment of me is unconscionable? Would that help you get your job back?" "No, but it might make a point." Xander's jaw tightened. "I need this job, Miss Jordan. I have been looking for work for 6 months, sleeping rough and taking what odd jobs I could find. I am sorry about what happened to you, truly, but I cannot afford grand gestures." "Of course not," Rebecca said bitterly. "After all, why should principles matter when money is at stake?" She regretted the words the moment they left her mouth, saw how they landed like blows. Xander's expression closed off, becoming the blank mask he had worn when he first appeared. "I will finish the roof," he said flatly. "Consider it my apology, inadequate as it is." "I do not want your apology or your help," Rebecca said, gathering her tools with jerky movements. "I want my job, but it seems neither of us gets what we want today." She climbed down from the roof and walked away without looking back, her vision blurring with tears she refused to shed in front of him. By the time she reached the small cabin she rented on the edge of town, the tears had dried into something harder and colder. She would not fall apart. She had survived worse than losing a teaching position. She would find another job, another town if necessary. She was a survivor. But as she sat in her tiny parlor, surrounded by the books and slates she had purchased with her own money to supplement the school's meager supplies, Rebecca felt the weight of exhaustion settle over her like a heavy blanket. She was tired of fighting, tired of proving herself, tired of being seen as less than simply because of her gender. In Missouri, it had been her family dismissing her aspirations. Here, it was the town council. Different faces, same old story. A knock at the door interrupted her spiral into self-pity. Rebecca considered ignoring it, but the knock came again, more insistent. With a sigh, she rose and opened the door to find Xander Walsh standing on her small porch, hat in hands. "Before you slam the door in my face, please hear me out," he said quickly. Rebecca crossed her arms. "I am listening. I have a proposal. Teach with me." "What?" "Share the position. We both teach, we both maintain the building, and we split the salary. $30 each is not ideal, but it is better than nothing for you and better than taking your job outright for me." Rebecca stared at him. "The council would never agree to that. They do not have to know. As far as they are concerned, I am the teacher. You would be my assistant, at least officially. That is dishonest. So is firing you without proper notice and lying about sending a letter," Xander pointed out. "Look, I know it is not perfect, but it gives you a way to keep teaching and gives me a clear conscience. Plus, from what I saw today, this town needs every educator it can get." Rebecca studied his face, searching for deception or ulterior motives. She found only earnest determination and something else, something that looked like understanding. He knew what it was like to need purpose, to need work that meant something more than just survival. She could see it in his eyes, that same hunger she felt. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. Xander looked away, out at the mountains rising beyond the town. "Because I spent a long time doing things I am not proud of, and I would like to start making different choices. This seems like a good place to begin." Rebecca made her decision. "All right, but we do this properly. I will not be some silent assistant who does all the work while you take the credit. We plan lessons together, we share all responsibilities equally, and if the council discovers the arrangement and objects, we tell them the truth." "Agreed." Xander offered his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Rebecca shook it. His grip was firm, warm, and for the first time since the mayor's visit, Rebecca felt a small flicker of hope. The first day of their partnership dawned cold and crisp, October arriving with frost on the windows and the promise of an early winter. Rebecca arrived at the schoolhouse before sunrise to find Xander already there, building up the fire in the pot-bellied stove that barely heated the single room. "You are early," she said, setting down her basket of supplies. "Could not sleep," Xander admitted. "Been a long time since I taught a class. Wanted to make sure everything was ready." They worked together to prepare the room, arranging the mismatched desks and chairs, writing the day's lessons on the slate board, setting out primers and McGuffey readers. The familiar routine soothed Rebecca's nerves, and she found herself relaxing slightly. Perhaps this arrangement could work. The students began arriving as the sun crested the mountains, a motley collection ranging from 6 to 15 years old. Rebecca knew them all by name. Little Emma Pritchard, who struggled with reading but excelled at mathematics, Thomas Freeman, who had a gift for memorization, the Miller twins, who spent more time whispering to each other than paying attention, and a dozen others, each with their own strengths and challenges. They stared at Xander with wide eyes, and Rebecca stepped forward to introduce him. Good morning, students. This is Mr. Walsh. He will be working with us this year to help with your education. What happened to just having Miss Jordan? Emma asked, her small voice uncertain. Sometimes having two teachers is better than one, Rebecca said gently. Mr. Walsh has different knowledge and experience that he can share with you. Xander moved to the front of the room, and Rebecca noticed how the older boys straightened slightly, responding to something in his bearing. I know change can be unsettling, he said, his deep voice carrying easily through the room. But Miss Jordan and I are going to work together to make this the best school year you have ever had. I expect respect, effort, and honesty from each of you. In return, I promise to treat you fairly and help you learn everything you need to succeed in this world. It was a good speech, Rebecca thought, straightforward, clear, reassuring. The students seemed to accept it, and soon they fell into the rhythm of the school day. Rebecca took the younger students for reading while Xander worked with the older ones on arithmetic. Then they switched, Xander teaching geography while Rebecca guided the middle group through grammar exercises. They moved around each other with surprising ease, and Rebecca found herself impressed by Xander's teaching style. He was patient but firm, never condescending, willing to explain concepts multiple times in different ways until understanding dawned. The students responded to him, even the troublesome ones who usually tested Rebecca's patience. During the lunch break, while the children ate outside in the weak sunshine, Rebecca and Xander reviewed the afternoon lessons. They sat at Rebecca's desk, heads bent over her lesson plans, and Rebecca was acutely aware of his proximity, the warmth of his shoulder nearly touching hers. "You are good with them," she said. "The students. I was worried they might struggle with the change, but they seem to like you." "They miss you being the sole teacher, though," Xander said. "I can see it in how they look at you. You have built something meaningful here." Rebecca felt a lump form in her throat. "I tried. I wanted to give them what I did not have growing up, a teacher who actually cared about their success rather than just going through the motions." "What was your teacher like?" "I did not have much formal schooling. My mother taught me to read using the Bible and whatever books we could borrow. My father thought education was wasted on girls." Rebecca heard the bitterness in her voice and tried to soften it. "When I was 16, a traveling teacher came through our town in Missouri. She saw me reading in the general store and offered to lend me her teaching manuals. That was when I decided I wanted to do this, to teach. It took me 2 more years to save enough to go to a normal school and get my certificate, and by then I knew I could never go back to the life my parents had planned for me." "What life was that?" "Marriage to a farmer's son, a house full of children, and silent obedience." Rebecca met Xander's eyes. "There is nothing wrong with that life if it is what someone chooses, but it was not my choice, and when I refused, my father told me I was no daughter of his, so I left." "That must have been hard." "It was liberating," Rebecca said, and she meant it. "Terrifying and lonely at times, but liberating. For the first time in my life, I got to decide my own path." Xander was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "I understand that feeling. The army gave me structure when I needed it, but it also took things from me I cannot get back. When my enlistment ended, I realized I had no idea who I was supposed to be in peacetime. Teaching seemed like a way to figure that out. Is it working? Ask me again in a few months." He smiled slightly, and the expression transformed his face, softening the hard edges. Rebecca found herself smiling back, and for a moment, the weight of their complicated situation lifted. The afternoon passed quickly, and when the last student left, calling cheerful goodbyes, Rebecca and Xander began the work of maintaining the building. Together, they patched more of the roof, repaired a broken window, and reinforced the wobbly legs on several desks. The work went faster with 2 sets of hands, and Rebecca had to admit that Xander's presence made the burden significantly lighter. "Thank you," she said as they cleaned up the tools in the fading light, "for suggesting this arrangement. I know it is not ideal for you either, taking half pay." "It is the right thing," Xander said simply. "Besides, I think we make a good team." Rebecca felt warmth bloom in her chest at his words, unexpected and a little frightening. She had spent 4 years carefully guarding her heart, focusing all her energy on teaching and self-sufficiency. The last thing she needed was to develop feelings for the man who had inadvertently upended her life. But as the days turned into weeks, Rebecca found it increasingly difficult to maintain her emotional distance. Xander was not just a competent teacher and a skilled handyman. He was kind, thoughtful, and surprisingly funny once his reserve began to crack. He brought extra firewood on cold mornings without being asked. He stayed late to help students who were struggling. He listened when Rebecca talked about her lesson plans and offered genuine, helpful suggestions rather than trying to take over. More than that, he seemed to understand the parts of her she usually kept hidden. When the mayor stopped by one day to inspect the school and made a snide comment about the cleanliness of the floors, Xander stepped in smoothly before Rebecca could lose her temper, pointing out all the improvements they had made and deflecting the criticism. When a parent complained that his daughter was learning too much mathematics and not enough domestic skills, Xander calmly explained that education served to open doors, not close them. He protected her in ways both large and small, and Rebecca was not sure how to handle the feelings that created. She had spent so long being her own defender that having someone stand beside her felt foreign and dangerously appealing. The first snow came in early November, blanketing our array in white and turning the schoolyard into a winter wonderland. The children shrieked with delight during recess, building snowmen and throwing snowballs while Rebecca and Xander watched from the doorway, stamping their feet to stay warm. "I never get tired of seeing them play," Rebecca said, watching Emma Pritchard and the Miller twins construct an elaborate snow fort. "They work so hard during lessons. They deserve to just be children for a while." "You care about them," Xander observed, "not just as students but as people." "Of course I do. How could I not?" Rebecca glanced at him. "Do you not feel the same?" "I do now," Xander said quietly. "But at first I saw them as responsibilities, tasks to manage. You taught me to see them differently, to notice their individual qualities and challenges." "You are a natural teacher, Rebecca, the best I have ever seen." It was the first time he had used her given name, and hearing it in his deep voice sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cold. "Thank you," she managed. "That means a great deal." They stood in companionable silence, watching the children play, and Rebecca was intensely aware of how close Xander stood, how she could feel the heat radiating from his body. If she leaned just slightly to the left, her shoulder would brush his. The urge to do exactly that was nearly overwhelming. "Rebecca," Xander said, his voice rough, "I need to tell you something." Her heart began to pound. "What is it?" Before he could answer, a commotion in the schoolyard drew their attention. Thomas Freeman and one of the older boys, Jack Sutton, were squaring off, fists raised, while the other children formed a circle around them. Xander was moving before Rebecca could react, striding through the snow with long steps. "That is enough," he said firmly, placing himself between the two boys. "Whatever this is about, fighting is not the solution." "He called my pa a cheat," Thomas said hotly, his face flushed. "He said all the miners are getting cheated on their wages and my pa is too stupid to notice." "I did not say stupid," Jack protested. "I said my pa told me the mine owners keep 2 sets of books, one showing the real profits and one showing what they pay out. That is cheating, and if the miners do not know, then maybe they should." Rebecca's mind raced. She knew there had been tension in town over wages, whispers of dissatisfaction among the miners who felt they were being taken advantage of by wealthy owners like Porter and Kaufman. The last thing the school needed was that conflict spilling over into the students. "Both of you inside," she said firmly. "The rest of you, recess is over." Inside, with the other students settled into quiet reading time, Rebecca and Xander took Thomas and Jack aside to talk. It took patience and careful listening, but eventually the boys calmed down, agreeing to disagree about their father's situations and to keep their hands to themselves in the future. After they had rejoined the class, Rebecca sagged against the wall. "That could have been much worse." "It is going to get worse," Xander said grimly. "I have seen this before in other mining towns. The owners push too hard, the workers push back, and the whole place can explode into violence. What do? We keep teaching. We show these children that there are better ways to resolve conflicts than with fists or guns. And we hope the adults in this town are smart enough to find a peaceful solution before things fall apart." But hoping, Rebecca discovered over the next few weeks, was not enough. The tension in Auray grew thicker, a palpable thing that hung over the town like the snow clouds gathering on the mountains. More than once, she saw groups of miners standing in tight knots, talking in low voices that ceased when outsiders approached. The mine owners became more visible, riding through town with armed guards, their expressions hard. The school became a small island of normalcy in the growing storm. Rebecca and Xander threw themselves into teaching, into creating a space where the children could forget, for a few hours each day, the troubles brewing in their homes. They organized a spelling bee that had the whole town talking. They started a reading circle for the older students, exposing them to literature beyond the basic primers. They worked together so seamlessly that Rebecca sometimes forgot where her efforts ended and Xander's began, and she was falling for him. There was no point in denying it anymore. She saw it in how her heart lifted when he smiled at her across the classroom, in how she looked forward to their morning conversations before the students arrived, in how safe she felt working beside him. Xander Walsh, with his scarred hands and wounded eyes and unexpected gentleness, had somehow slipped past all her defenses. The question was whether he felt the same. She got her answer on a cold December afternoon when they were alone in the schoolhouse, preparing for the Christmas program they had planned. Rebecca was standing on a ladder, hanging paper decorations the children had made when her foot slipped on the rung. Xander caught her, his arms coming around her waist, steadying her against his chest. For a moment they froze, and Rebecca could feel his heart pounding against her back as fast as her own. "Are you all right?" His breath was warm against her ear. "Yes," Rebecca whispered, not moving. She did not want to move, wanted to stay exactly where she was, held safe in his arms. "Rebecca." Xander's voice was strained. "I need to tell you something, what I tried to say before." She turned in his arms, still on the ladder, bringing them nearly face to face. "What is it?" "This arrangement, working together, it has become the best part of my life. You have become the best part of my life." His eyes searched hers, vulnerable and hopeful. "I know the timing is terrible and the situation is complicated, but I am falling in love with you. I think I have been falling for you since that first day when you were so fierce and stubborn on that roof." Rebecca's breath caught. "Xander, you do not have to say anything," he said quickly. "I just needed you to know. I needed to be honest with you." "Stop talking," Rebecca said, and she kissed him. It was a gentle kiss, tentative, a question more than a statement. Xander's hands came up to cup her face, his touch reverent, and he kissed her back with a tenderness that made her eyes sting with tears. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Rebecca rested her forehead against his. "I have been falling for you too," she admitted. "I did not want to. I have spent so long protecting myself, keeping everyone at arm's length, but you slipped through anyway. You and your quiet kindness and your understanding and the way you look at me like I am something precious." "You are precious," Xander said fiercely. "You are brilliant and strong and so damn brave. Watching you fight for these children, for your place in the world, it humbles me. You make me want to be better, to build instead of destroy." Rebecca kissed him again, longer this time, deeper, pouring all her feelings into it. Xander responded in kind, and for a few perfect moments, the world narrowed to just the two of them. Two battered hearts finding unexpected healing in each other. The sound of approaching voices broke them apart. Rebecca climbed down from the ladder, smoothing her hair and dress, trying to look composed despite her flushed cheeks and racing heart. Xander cleared his throat and turned his attention to organizing the papers on the desk, but Rebecca saw the smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The door opened to reveal Mayor Hendricks and several other town council members, their expressions grim. "Mr. Walsh, Miss Jordan," Hendricks said, not bothering with pleasantries. "We need to speak with you about the Christmas program." Rebecca's stomach sank. "What about it?" "We are canceling it," Samuel Porter said bluntly. "Given the current tensions in town, gathering everyone together seems unwise." "The Christmas program is a tradition," Rebecca protested. "The children have been working on it for weeks. You cannot simply cancel it." "We can and we are," Hendricks said. "Furthermore, we are closing the school for the remainder of December. Things are likely to get ugly in the coming weeks, and we do not want children caught in the middle." "Closing the school will not protect them," Xander said, his voice hard. "It will just leave them unsupervised while their parents are caught up in whatever is coming. The school is the safest place for them to be." "The decision is made," Kaufman said dismissively. "You will inform the students tomorrow that there will be no more classes until January at the earliest. Your pay will continue, Mr. Walsh, so you have no grounds for complaint." They left without waiting for a response, and Rebecca felt tears of frustration prick at her eyes. "They are using the children as pawns. This is not about safety. This is about control." "I know," Xander said grimly. "But we cannot fight the entire town council." "Why not?" Rebecca's temper flared. "They have been pushing people around for too long, making decisions that benefit themselves while everyone else suffers. Someone needs to stand up to them. And say what? That they are wrong. They know they are wrong, they just do not care." Xander ran a hand through his hair. "I have seen this before, Rebecca. I have watched towns tear themselves apart over greed and pride. It never ends well for the people who get in the way. So we do nothing. We just let them hurt these children." "I did not say that." Xander's jaw tightened. "But we need to be smart about how we fight back. Reckless heroism just gets people killed." Rebecca heard the weight of experience in his words and forced herself to take a breath. "What do you suggest?" "We hold the Christmas program anyway," Xander said after a moment. "Not at the school where the council has authority, but somewhere else. Somewhere that matters to the families." "Where?" "The church. Reverend Matthews has been supportive of the school. If we ask him, he might let us use the building." It was a good idea, and Rebecca felt hope flicker to life again. "The council cannot stop us from gathering at a church. They can try, but it would look bad, interfering with a religious gathering." Xander smiled slightly. "And if we frame it as a community celebration rather than a school event, they have even less grounds to object." They worked late into the evening, planning and refining their approach. When they finally left the schoolhouse, walking together through the snow-covered streets, Xander took Rebecca's hand. It was a simple gesture, but it felt momentous, a public declaration of their connection. Are you sure about this? Rebecca asked. About us, I mean. It could complicate things with the town council. They already think a woman teaching is scandalous. If they discover we are courting. Let them discover it, Xander said firmly. I am tired of hiding and pretending. I want everyone to know that you are the woman I love, and I am damn proud of it. Rebecca squeezed his hand, warmth flooding through her despite the cold. I love you too, she said, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. I did not think I would ever feel this way about anyone. Xander stopped walking and turned to face her, his free hand coming up to brush a strand of hair from her face. I need you to know something about me, about my past. Before we go any further, you deserve the whole truth. Rebecca's heart began to pound, but she kept her voice steady. Tell me. I told you I was a soldier, and that is true. But after the war ended, I did not go into teaching right away. I spent 5 years as a hired gun, working for whoever would pay me. I protected cattle drives, guarded payrolls, and sometimes I hurt people who probably did not deserve it. I became good at violence, and for a while I did not care about much else. He paused, his eyes searching hers. 2 years ago, I was hired to help break a miners' strike in Nevada. The owners wanted us to scare the workers back into line. Things got out of hand. A young miner, could not have been more than 18, tried to stand up to us. My partner shot him. Rebecca felt tears slip down her cheeks as Xander continued, his voice rough with emotion. I could have stopped it. I saw it coming, saw my partner reaching for his gun, and I just stood there. By the time I moved, it was too late. That boy died in the dirt, and I realized I had become the kind of man I used to fight against. So I left. I walked away from that life and spent the last 2 years trying to figure out how to be someone different. Is that why you became a teacher? Rebecca asked softly. Yes. I thought if I could help young people build better futures, it might balance out some of the damage I have done. I know it does not erase anything, but it is all I have to offer. Rebecca reached up to cup his face, feeling the tension in his jaw. You are not that person anymore. I know you are not. How can you be sure? Because I have watched you with these children. I have seen your patience, your kindness, your genuine care for their well-being. The man you are describing would not fight to give them a Christmas program. He would not share his salary to keep me teaching. He would not look at me the way you are looking at me right now. Xander pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. I do not deserve you. Yes, you do, Rebecca said firmly. We all have things in our past we wish we could change. What matters is who we choose to be now, today. And today, you are a good man who makes me happy. That is enough. They stood there in the snow, holding each other, and Rebecca felt something settle in her chest. This was right. Despite all the complications and challenges, despite uncertain futures and difficult pasts, this love was right. The next week was a flurry of activity. Rebecca and Xander approached Reverend Matthews, who enthusiastically agreed to host the Christmas program at the church. Word spread through the mining families, and soon parents were offering to help with preparations, contributing what they could despite their own financial struggles. The community rallied together in a way Rebecca had not seen before, united by their desire to give their children something beautiful in the midst of hardship. The town council, when they learned about the plans, were predictably furious. Mayor Hendricks came to the church personally to try to shut things down, but Reverend Matthews stood firm. This is a house of God, the Reverend said calmly. You have no authority here. These families are gathering to celebrate the birth of Christ and to support their children. If you try to stop that, you will answer to a higher power than the town council. Hendricks left in a huff, but Rebecca knew this was not over. She saw the calculation in his eyes, the anger at being defied. She and Xander would pay for this defiance somehow. But on the night of the Christmas program, standing in the decorated church with the pews packed full of families, Rebecca could not bring herself to care about future consequences. The children performed beautifully, reciting poems and singing carols with voices that filled the small building with joy. Parents who had been at odds with each other over the mining disputes sat side by side, united in pride for their children. For one evening, our Ray felt like a real community instead of a powder keg waiting to explode. After the program, as families mingled and shared refreshments, Xander found Rebecca in a quiet corner. "You did this," he said, gesturing to the happy chaos around them. "You brought them together." "We did this," Rebecca corrected. "I could not have managed it alone." "Partners," Xander said, and the word held layers of meaning. "Partners," Rebecca agreed. They were standing close enough that Rebecca could feel the warmth of his body, and she had to resist the urge to lean into him. This was not the time or place for public displays of affection, not with half the town watching, but Xander seemed to have different ideas about propriety. He reached out and took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers in full view of everyone. "I am tired of hiding what you mean to me," he said quietly. "Let them talk." Rebecca's heart swelled and she squeezed his hand back. Around them she saw heads turning, whispers starting, but she did not care. For the first time in her life, she was not afraid of what people thought. She was in love, deeply and completely, and that was worth any amount of scandal. The new year brought both hope and hardship. In early January, the mine owners announced wage cuts, sparking outrage among the workers. Talk of a strike filled the streets, and the atmosphere in our ray grew heavy with impending conflict. Rebecca and Xander reopened the school, determined to maintain normalcy for the children, but it was increasingly difficult to ignore the tension. Then, on a bitter cold morning in mid-January, everything came to a head. Rebecca was in the schoolhouse early, preparing lessons, when she heard shouting outside. She rushed to the window to see a crowd of miners marching toward the town center, their faces set with determination. At the same time, armed guards hired by the mine owners were positioning themselves in front of the mining offices. Xander appeared at her side, his expression grim. "Get the children inside when they arrive and keep them away from the windows." "Where are you going?" "To try to stop this before people get killed." He headed for the door, but Rebecca caught his arm. "You said reckless heroism gets people killed," she reminded him, fear making her voice sharp. "This is not heroism. This is necessity." Xander cupped her face gently. "I have watched conflicts like this spiral into violence too many times. If there is any chance I can help prevent that, I have to try." "Then I am coming with you." "Rebecca, no." "Yes," she said firmly. "You said we are partners. That means we face things together." Xander looked like he wanted to argue, but voices outside grew louder, more agitated. He cursed under his breath and grabbed Rebecca's hand. "Stay close to me." They hurried toward the town center, where the two groups were facing off. The miners numbered at least 50, angry and desperate men who had reached the end of their patience. The mine owners' guards numbered fewer, perhaps 20, but they were armed with rifles and had the cold-eyed look of men willing to use them. Mayor Hendricks stood between the groups, looking panicked. "Everyone needs to calm down. There is no need for violence." "No need," one of the miners, a burly man named O'Brien, stepped forward. "You cut our wages by a third and you say there is no need." "Our families are starving while Porter and Kaufman build mansions. That is violence. The mines are not profitable enough to maintain current wages," Porter called from behind his guards. "You can accept the cuts or find work elsewhere." "There is no work elsewhere, and you know it," another miner shouted. "You have us trapped, and you are squeezing every drop of blood you can get." Xander moved forward, positioning himself between the two groups. Rebecca stayed close, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "This does not have to end in bloodshed," Xander said, his voice carrying across the crowd. "I have seen these situations before. I have seen good men die for pride and greed, leaving widows and orphans behind. Is that what you want?" "We want fair wages," O'Brien said. "We want to be treated like human beings instead of pack animals." "And you deserve that," Xander agreed. "But getting shot in the street will not get it for you. Your families need you alive." He turned to face the mine owners. "And you need to understand that these men are not your enemies. They are the reason your mines produce anything at all. Without them, you have nothing but holes in the ground. Treating them fairly is not charity, it is good business." "We do not take advice from school teachers," Kaufman said dismissively. "Then maybe you should," Rebecca spoke up, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "Because a school teacher sees the consequences of your decisions every day. I see children coming to class hungry because their father's wages barely cover rent. I see bright minds that could do great things if given the chance, but instead, they will end up in those mines by the time they are 12 because their families need the income. Is that the legacy you want? A town full of broken families and wasted potential?" Her words hung in the air, and Rebecca saw several of the guards shifting uncomfortably. These were local men, she realized, men who probably had their own children in her classroom. "Miss Jordan makes a good point," Reverend Matthews said, stepping forward from the crowd. "We are all part of the same community. When one part suffers, we all suffer. Perhaps instead of preparing for battle, we should be looking for solutions." "What kind of solutions?" one of the miners asked skeptically. "A meeting," Xander suggested. "Representatives from the workers, the owners, and neutral parties from the town. Sit down together and negotiate in good faith. It may not solve everything, but it is better than the alternative." For a long moment, no one moved. Then O'Brien lowered his makeshift weapon and nodded. "I will be part of that meeting. But if the owners refuse to negotiate fairly, we are back here tomorrow, and next time we will not be so patient." Porter and Kaufman conferred in low voices. Finally, Porter stepped forward. "Fine, we will meet, but we expect the same good faith from the workers. No sabotage, no threats." "Agreed," O'Brien said. The tension began to dissipate, the two groups backing away from each other, though the anger remained palpable. Rebecca felt her knees go weak with relief, and Xander's hand found hers, squeezing tight. "That was incredible," he murmured. "What you said about the children. I meant every word." They walked back to the schoolhouse together, and Rebecca was surprised to find several students already waiting despite the chaos. Teaching had to continue, life had to continue, no matter what storms raged outside their small sanctuary. The negotiations took 3 weeks, filled with heated arguments, walkouts, and near breakdowns. Rebecca and Xander continued teaching, creating an island of normalcy while the town's future hung in the balance. They also continued growing closer, stealing moments together when they could, learning the small intimacies of love. Rebecca learned that Xander hummed tunelessly when he was deep in thought, that he was ticklish behind his left ear, that he took his coffee black but loved sweet things. Xander learned that Rebecca talked in her sleep about lesson plans, that she had a small scar on her right hand from a kitchen accident when she was 9, that she cried during particularly beautiful poetry. Finally, in early February, an agreement was reached. Wages would be reduced, but only by 10% instead of 33%, and the mine owners agreed to improve safety conditions and provide a doctor for the workers. It was not everything the miners wanted, but it was enough to keep families fed and housed. The night the agreement was announced, there was a celebration in the streets. Rebecca and Xander stood on the schoolhouse steps, watching the town come alive with relief and joy. "We helped make this happen," Rebecca said wonderingly. "Our words mattered." "Your words mattered," Xander corrected. "You reminded everyone what was at stake, what they were fighting for. You gave them perspective." Rebecca leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling bone-deep exhaustion mixed with satisfaction. "I could not have done it without you standing beside me." "I will always stand beside you," Xander said quietly, "for as long as you will have me." Rebecca pulled back to look at him, seeing the question in his eyes. Her heart began to race. "Xander, marry me," he said, the words rushing out. "I know we have only known each other a few months, and I know I am not the man you probably dreamed of, but I love you, Rebecca. I want to build a life with you, to keep teaching together, to make a real difference in this town. Marry me." Tears streamed down Rebecca's face, but she was smiling. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Xander lifted her off her feet, spinning her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he kissed her with a passion that left her breathless, not caring who might see. They were married in March, in the same church where they had held the Christmas program. The entire town came, miners and merchants and students, filling the pews to overflowing. Rebecca wore a simple dress of pale blue, made by the mother of one of her students, and carried wildflowers that were just beginning to bloom in the mountain valleys. Xander stood at the altar looking nervous and proud, his eyes never leaving her face as she walked down the aisle. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony, speaking about love as a choice, a daily decision to stand together against whatever challenges came. Rebecca felt the truth of those words resonate in her bones. Loving Xander was both the easiest and most challenging thing she had ever done, a constant act of bravery and trust. When they exchanged vows, Rebecca's voice was steady and sure. "I promise to stand beside you, to fight with you and for you, to build a life of meaning and purpose. I promise to love you in your strength and your vulnerability, in success and failure. I promise to be your partner in all things." Xander's voice shook slightly as he spoke. "I promise to honor you, to respect your independence even as I offer my support. I promise to learn from you, to grow with you, to never take your presence in my life for granted. I promise to love you with everything I am and everything I hope to become." When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, the congregation erupted in applause. Xander kissed Rebecca deeply, and she felt joy burst through her like sunlight breaking through clouds. The reception was held in the schoolhouse, transformed with decorations and food contributed by grateful families. There was dancing and laughter, the earlier tensions of winter forgotten in the celebration of new beginnings. Rebecca danced with her husband, marveling at how the word sounded in her mind. Husband. Xander Walsh was her husband and she was his wife, and together they would face whatever came. Later, as the party wound down and guests began to drift home, Mayor Hendricks approached them. Rebecca tensed, expecting trouble, but the mayor's expression was almost sheepish. "I owe you both an apology," he said. "I underestimated you, Miss Jordan. You too, Mr. Walsh. What you did during the labor dispute, the way you brought people together, it was impressive. The town council has been discussing the school situation, and we would like to offer you both official positions as co-teachers at full salary each." Rebecca stared at him. "Full salary, you mean?" $60 per month each, Hendricks confirmed, plus an increased maintenance budget for the school building. "We realize now that having two dedicated educators is an asset, not a liability, assuming you are both willing to continue." Rebecca looked at Xander, saw her own disbelief and joy mirrored in his face. "Yes," they said together. After Hendricks left, Rebecca collapsed into a chair, laughing. Did that really just happen? I think it did, Xander said, sitting beside her and pulling her close. We did it. We changed their minds. We proved our worth, Rebecca corrected. We showed them that we are stronger together. Xander kissed her temple. We are definitely stronger together. They spent their wedding night in the small cabin Rebecca had been renting, which was now their home. It was cramped and modest, but as Xander carried her over the threshold, Rebecca felt like she was entering a palace. This was theirs, a space they would share, a foundation for their life together. Making love for the first time was tender and awkward and beautiful, a learning process filled with whispered questions and gentle explorations. Rebecca had feared this intimacy, had worried that her lack of experience would disappoint. But Xander was patient and attentive, more concerned with her comfort than his own pleasure. Afterward, lying in his arms with moonlight streaming through the window, Rebecca felt more at peace than she ever had in her life. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Xander murmured against her hair. "Thank you for taking a chance on me." "Thank you for seeing me," Rebecca said. "For treating me as an equal when so many others did not." The next years unfolded like the pages of a book, each season bringing new chapters. They continued teaching together, becoming known throughout the region for their innovative methods and dedication. Students who might otherwise have quit school stayed because Rebecca and Xander made learning engaging and relevant. They taught practical skills alongside academics, preparing their students for whatever futures they chose. The school building itself was transformed, thanks to the increased budget and their tireless efforts. The roof was completely replaced, new windows installed, a second room added to accommodate growing enrollment. Parents who had been skeptical of education began to see its value as their children flourished. Rebecca and Xander's marriage deepened and matured, weathering the inevitable disagreements and challenges with the same teamwork they brought to teaching. They learned each other's rhythms, developed shared jokes and traditions, built a partnership that felt unshakable. In the spring of 1881, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She had never been around babies much and had no idea if she would be a good mother. But Xander's excitement was contagious, and soon Rebecca found herself imagining a future expanded to include a child. "What if I am terrible at this?" she asked one evening as they sat on their small porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. "You are an excellent teacher," Xander pointed out. "And you have more patience than anyone I know. You will be an amazing mother." Teaching other people's children and raising my own are very different things. "True. But you do not have to be perfect, Rebecca. You just have to love our child and do your best. That is all any parent can do." Their son was born in November, a healthy baby with Xander's dark eyes and Rebecca's stubborn chin. They named him Samuel James Walsh, and from the moment Rebecca held him, she understood a new dimension of love. This tiny person, so dependent and trusting, had the power to break her heart and heal it simultaneously. Motherhood was harder than teaching had ever been, filled with sleepless nights and constant worry. Rebecca returned to the classroom after 3 months, and they worked out a system where Xander taught the morning lessons while Rebecca cared for Samuel. Then they switched in the afternoon. It was exhausting and chaotic and wonderful. Samuel grew into a bright, curious toddler who loved nothing more than sitting in the schoolroom watching the older students. By the time he was 3, he could recite half the alphabet and count to 20. Rebecca and Xander joked that they were raising the next generation's teacher. In 1884, Rebecca became pregnant again, this time with twins. The pregnancy was difficult, leaving her bedridden for the last 2 months. Xander took over all the teaching responsibilities while also caring for Samuel and Rebecca, and though he never complained, Rebecca could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "I am sorry," she said one evening as he brought her dinner in bed. "I am supposed to be your partner, but instead I am just a burden." "You are growing two human beings inside your body," Xander said firmly. "That is the opposite of being a burden. You are doing the hardest work there is." The twins, a boy and a girl, were born in early July. They named them Thomas Peter and Eleanor Grace. And suddenly, their small cabin felt impossibly full of life and noise and love. Rebecca had to step back from teaching for a full year to manage the demands of 3 young children. And though she missed the classroom, she also cherished this time of intensive motherhood. Xander proved himself to be an extraordinary father, patient and playful with the children, never treating their care as beneath him or solely Rebecca's responsibility. He changed diapers, soothed nightmares, told bedtime stories, and did it all with the same dedication he brought to teaching. When Rebecca finally returned to the classroom, they hired a local woman, Mrs. Patterson, to help with the children during school hours. It was an adjustment, trusting someone else with her babies, but Mrs. Patterson was kind and competent, and Rebecca gradually relaxed. The years continued to pass, marked by milestones both large and small. Samuel started school and proved to be as bright as they had hoped. The twins developed distinct personalities, Thomas quiet and thoughtful, Eleanor bold and adventurous. The school continued to grow, eventually requiring them to hire an additional teacher to help manage the increasing enrollment. In 1889, the town council approached Rebecca and Xander about opening a secondary school for students who had completed the basic curriculum. It was an ambitious undertaking, requiring a new building and expanded resources, but they agreed enthusiastically. Education, they believed, was the key to breaking cycles of poverty and limitation. The more they could offer, the more possibilities they could create for young people. The secondary school opened in 1890, housed in a building the community built together through donated labor and materials. Rebecca taught literature and history, while Xander focused on mathematics and sciences. Their reputation spread, and students began coming from surrounding towns, some boarding with local families to attend. Through it all, their love remained the foundation of everything they built. They still made time for each other, stealing away for walks in the mountains when they could, sitting together by the fire after the children were in bed, maintaining the intimacy that had first drawn them together. They had learned that love was not just a feeling but a practice, something that required intention and effort to sustain. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1899, their children, now grown, organized a surprise party. Samuel, 18 and preparing to attend college to become a teacher himself, gave a speech thanking his parents for showing him what a true partnership looked like. Thomas and Eleanor, 15, presented them with a painting they had commissioned, showing Rebecca and Xander standing together in front of the schoolhouse. Rebecca cried, overwhelmed by gratitude for the life they had built. 20 years ago, she had been a woman fighting to keep her job, convinced she would spend her life alone. Now she was surrounded by family and community, having created something meaningful and lasting. "What are you thinking?" Xander asked later that night as they prepared for bed. "I am thinking about that first day when I dropped my hammer and nearly hit you." Rebecca smiled at the memory. "If someone had told me then that you would become my husband, the father of my children, my partner in everything that matters, I would not have believed them." "I knew," Xander said, pulling her into his arms. "Maybe not that exact future, but I knew from that first moment that you were going to change my life. You were so fierce up on that roof, so determined. I thought, here is a woman who knows what she wants and will fight for it. I wanted to be part of that fight. You did more than fight beside me, Rebecca said, resting her head against his chest. You helped me see that I did not have to do everything alone, that accepting help and partnership was not weakness. You taught me to trust. You taught me that I could be more than my past, Xander replied. That people can change, can build new lives from broken pieces. You gave me hope when I had forgotten what it felt like. They stood there holding each other, two people who had found in each other exactly what they needed. The road had not always been smooth. There had been challenges and hardships, moments of doubt and fear. But they had faced it all together, and that had made all the difference. As the new century dawned, Rebecca and Xander began to step back from daily teaching, transitioning into advisory roles while younger teachers took over the classrooms. Samuel had returned to our array after college, joining the teaching staff and bringing fresh energy and ideas. Thomas decided to become a doctor, heading east for medical school, while Alina surprised everyone by expressing interest in law, determined to fight for workers' rights and social justice. Rebecca and Xander were proud of all their children, seeing in them the values they had tried to instill, the belief that education and compassion could change the world. But they were also ready to enjoy a quieter life, to travel and rest, and simply enjoy each other's company without the constant demands of work. They took a trip to San Francisco in 1902, seeing the ocean for the first time. Standing on the beach with waves crashing at their feet, Xander turned to Rebecca and said, "I never thought I would see this. Never thought I would have time or reason to travel just for the sake of seeing something beautiful." "We have earned it," Rebecca said, squeezing his hand. "We have spent decades giving to others. Now we get to give to ourselves." They returned to our array renewed and content, settling into a comfortable routine. They read together in the evenings, walked through town greeting old friends and former students, many of whom now had children of their own attending the schools Rebecca and Xander had built. The legacy they had created was tangible, visible in the thriving educational system and the community that had grown around it. In 1905, on a warm September morning much like the one when they first met, Rebecca and Xander stood together looking at the schoolhouse. It had been expanded and improved over the years, barely recognizable from the dilapidated building where they had started. The roof was solid, the windows gleamed, and the sound of children's laughter drifted through the open doors. "We did well," Xander said quietly. "We did," Rebecca agreed. "We built something that will last beyond us, that will keep helping people long after we are gone." Xander wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "I love you, Rebecca Walsh. Thank you for 27 years of partnership, adventure, and joy." "I love you too," Rebecca said, leaning into his embrace. "Thank you for seeing me on that roof all those years ago, for taking a chance on a stubborn woman with a broken hammer and dreams bigger than anyone thought she could achieve." "Your dreams were never too big," Xander said. "If anything, they were just the right size to change everything." They stood there together, two people who had started as strangers and became partners, lovers, spouses, parents, and friends. The journey had transformed them both, healing old wounds and creating new strengths. What had begun with a woman repairing a roof had become a love story that repaired two damaged hearts and built something beautiful from the broken pieces. Years continued to pass peacefully. Rebecca and Xander grew old together, their hair turning silver, their steps slowing but their minds remaining sharp. They watched their children build their own lives and families, saw grandchildren come into the world. The schools they had founded continued to flourish, educating generations of students who went on to become teachers, doctors, lawyers, engineers, and artists. In 1918, Xander fell ill with pneumonia. Rebecca nursed him through it, sitting by his bedside day and night, holding his hand and reading to him from their favorite books. He recovered, but they both knew their time was growing shorter. They began to speak more openly about death, about what they wanted for their final years and how they wished to be remembered. "I want to be remembered as someone who tried to build more than he destroyed," Xander said one evening. "Someone who found redemption through love and service." "You are that person," Rebecca assured him. "You have been that person for 40 years. Anyone who knows you knows your character." "Because of you," Xander insisted, "you made me believe I could be better. You loved me into becoming the man I wanted to be." Rebecca kissed his forehead gently. "We loved each other into becoming our best selves. That is what partnership means." They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary in 1919, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and what felt like half of our array. The party was held in the largest school building, decorated with photographs documenting their decades together. Looking at those images, seeing their younger selves gradually age and mature, Rebecca felt a profound sense of satisfaction. They had lived fully, loved deeply, and left the world better than they found it. Xander passed away peacefully in his sleep on a winter night in 1921, Rebecca beside him. She woke to find his hand still in hers, his face peaceful, the struggle finally over. The grief was immense, a physical ache that left her gasping, but underneath it ran a current of gratitude. They had been given 43 years together, decades when they might have had nothing. She had been loved completely, had loved in return, and that was a gift beyond measure. Rebecca lived another 8 years, remaining active in the schools and community despite her advanced age. She watched the world change, saw automobiles become common, heard radio broadcasts, witnessed women finally gain the right to vote. But what mattered most to her were the smaller moments, the former students who came to visit and tell her how she had changed their lives, the grandchildren who asked to hear stories about their grandfather, the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had made a difference. In the spring of 1929, Rebecca became ill. Her children gathered around her, keeping vigil as she had once kept vigil for Xander. On her final day, Samuel read to her from her favorite poetry while Thomas held her hand, and Helena sat at the foot of the bed, all of them present as she had always been present for them. As Rebecca felt herself slipping away, her last thoughts were of a September morning 51 years earlier, of a handsome stranger catching her hammer and looking up at her with eyes that held the promise of everything to come. She had been repairing a roof, but he had repaired her heart, and together they had built a life of meaning and love. She died with a smile on her face, surrounded by the family they had created and the legacy they had built. The town of Auray mourned her passing, recognizing that they had lost not just a teacher but a pillar of their community. The schools closed for a day of remembrance, and hundreds attended her funeral, testament to the countless lives she had touched. Rebecca and Xander were buried side by side in the Auray cemetery, their headstones simple but eloquent. Hers read, "Rebecca Jordan Walsh, beloved teacher, mother, and wife. She taught us all to reach higher." His read, "Xander Walsh, devoted educator and father. He built bridges where others saw walls." Between them, carved into a shared stone, were the words "partners in all things, together always." In the years that followed, their children and grandchildren continued their work, maintaining the schools and expanding educational opportunities. The original schoolhouse was preserved as a historical site, a reminder of where it all began, of two people who met by chance and built something extraordinary through love, determination, and unwavering partnership. The story of the teacher Cowboy and the woman on the roof became local legend, told and retold through generations. Young couples would visit their graves and promise each other to be partners, as Rebecca and Xander had been. Teachers would invoke their names when encouraging students to pursue education despite obstacles. The legacy they had built together lived on, touching lives they would never meet, creating ripples that spread far beyond what they could have imagined. And sometimes, on quiet September mornings when mist hung in the mountain valleys and the light hit just right, people walking past the old schoolhouse swore they could see two figures working on the roof together, still building, still partnering, still loving across the boundaries of life and death. Whether it was real or simply the product of collective memory and hope did not matter. What mattered was that Rebecca Jordan and Xander Walsh had shown that love could heal, that partnerships could transform, and that two broken people could find wholeness in each other. Their story ended the way all good stories should end, with love triumphant, purpose fulfilled, and a legacy that would endure for generations. They had lived well, loved deeply, and left the world brighter for their presence. In the end, that was all anyone could hope for, and it was everything that mattered.